Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'm going to be demonstrating how to crochet the one ball easy striped crochet baby blanket, which is a lovely pattern that I designed for yarnspirations.com. This pattern uses just one cake of red heart fleece hugs, and I've chosen this really pretty elephant colorway, but of course you can choose whichever colorway you like. I also used a USK hook, which is a 6.5 millimeter hook, and you'll also need your standard crochet supplies, like stitch markers, a yarn needle, and scissors. Now this pattern is made, as I said, with just one ball of the Red Heart Fleece Hugs, and it's worked in one piece from the bottom up, back and forth in rows. Finished, it's approximately 35 inches wide and about 33 inches long. And of course, if you want to make it longer, you can just add more yarn. When you download the free PDF from Yarnspirations, you'll find both the written instructions and a charted sample of the pattern. So whichever type of instructions you prefer, you can follow along with this video. Today, for the sake of time, I'll be making this reduced sample of the pattern, but it will demonstrate all the stitches that you'll find inside the finished blanket. Now to make the full-size blanket, you'll want to start the first row with 87 foundation double crochets. So to make a double crochet, what we're going to do is chain 2, and those first 2 chains are not going to count as our first double crochet or as our first stitch, but we'll yarn over and go into that underneath loop of the first chain you've made. And this is going to be a little bit harder to find in this yarn. And that's the reason I chose to use foundation stitches for this first round, so I didn't have to make a long row of chains to work into. But if you prefer, you can do it that way as well. As long as you have 87 double crochets at the end of your first row, that's the important part. So I've pulled up that loop through that first chain I made. So now I have 3 loops on my hook. So I'm going to yarn over, pull through just that first loop. There we are. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. And that will be the first double crochet. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is put a stitch marker right in the top of that stitch I just finished, so that I know when I come back for row 2 that that is the last stitch that I'll want to work into for that row. So for all the remaining foundation double crochets, they're going to be worked like so. We're going to yarn over, go under the bottom 2 loops at the bottom of that stitch we just made, like so. There we are. We yarn over, pull up a loop. We've got 3 loops left on our hook. We yarn over, pull through just the first one. Now that's the chain at the bottom of this one. Then we yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. And that's our second one. So you'll want to make a total, like I say, of 87 for the full-size blanket, or however you like to make a row of 87 double crochets is absolutely fine. If you'd like a closer look at how to make the foundation double crochet, please do look for that tutorial on the Moogly YouTube channel, where I've worked it in smooth yarn and it's a little bit easier to see. Okay, so at the end of your first row, you should have 87 double crochets, but I wanted to give you a couple of tips. If you're having trouble counting your stitches, you can look for that little string inside the yarn for each of those V's, or you can pull apart the individual posts here and just count each one of those posts to make sure that you have the proper number of stitches. And if you're struggling working into that chain or making those foundation double crochets, finding those 2 loops at the bottom, however you're working those stitches, again, don't fret too much. Just try and get the right number of stitches. If you've gone into the wrong loop somewhere, I bet nobody's going to be able to tell in this yarn. So let's go ahead and start row 3. We're going to start with a chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and this will count as our first double crochet for the remainder of this pattern, the first chain 3 at the beginning of the row. So let's go ahead and put a stitch marker right in the top of that chain 3 so that we know that that is the top of our stitch when we come back to work the other direction. So turning to work back in that other direction, we're going to double crochet in each of the next 2 stitches. So again, just kind of feel for where those should be. Aim to put them above the stitches in the row below. So there's 1 and 2. There we are. Then we are going to skip the next stitch and work a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet in the stitch after that, commonly known as a V-stitch. So we're going to yarn over, skip the next stitch, find that next one. Again, just kind of feel around for your hook to find where it should go. And then we'll work a double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet right back in that same stitch. The nice thing is once you've worked 1 stitch in it, it's a lot easier to find that again. Then we're going to skip the next stitch and work double crochets in the next 3 stitches. So there's 1 and 2 and 3. And you can see I've used a K hook here, which I also mentioned at the beginning. This yarn actually calls for a little bit smaller hook, I believe an I hook. So I've used a slightly larger hook that will help you find these stitches just a little bit easier as well. So after you've made those 3 double crochets, we continue on with our repeat. That's going to take us all the way across. We skip the next stitch, V-stitch in the stitch after that. So that's a double crochet, chain 1, and double crochet right back in that same stitch. Then we skip the next stitch and double crochet in the next 3. And that is the repeat that will take you all the way across the blanket. Of course, on our little guy here, I'm almost there, so I'm going to keep repeating that too, and I'll see you as we get to the end here of row 2. So as you can see, that repeat does take us all the way right to the end where we finish with 3 double crochets in those very last 3 stitches. So with that, we can take our stitch marker out here and turn to come back for our 3rd row. Now, as I said, the 3rd row, like all the rest, are going to start with a chain 3. That will be our first double crochet. So I'm going to go ahead and put that stitch marker in the top of this chain 3 now. I'm a really big fan of using stitch markers to help you keep your place in a pattern, particularly when you've got a fuzzy yarn like this. It really is so much better than getting to the end of the row or the end of the next row and realizing you missed a stitch and you have to pull it all out. So after we've made our chain 3, we are going to work double crochets again in each of the next 2 stitches. And this is something that will continue throughout the pattern. We'll have 3 double crochets, if you include that chain 3, at the beginning and at the end of every row. This way, we don't have to go back and work any sort of border for this pattern. We're essentially building it right in with that row of double crochet and these 3 double crochets at the beginning and end of each row. We're building it right in as we crochet it. So we've got our chain 3, we've double crocheted in each of the next 2 stitches, and now we are going to skip the next stitch and we work a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet in the chain 1 space. So that's a little bit easier to see here. We're going to skip that first part of the V and we're going to work right into that chain 1 space for another V stitch. So we go right in there, work our double crochet, chain 1, then right back into that stitch. So you don't have to worry about getting into any particular stitch. Just like so. There we go. And pull up a little bit more. I'm actually using, this is a slightly different colorway, one with some blue in it, just to get a little bit of variety here. There we go. All right, then we are going to jump over here. We've got that set of 3 double crochets. What we want to do is work 3 double crochets, but only in that center one. So we want to find the center one of those set of 3 and work 3 double crochets all right into that center stitch. So there's 1, we'll go right back in for the other 2. So you can see I tried to put together a stitch pattern here that you're working into the chain spaces a lot, or you're able to find that center stitch. So it's a little bit easier once you get past that first row. Now that essentially was our repeat, which will take us all the way, almost all the way to the end. Since remember, we're going to end with 3 double crochets. We've got our 3 double crochets in that center one. So the next thing coming up in the previous row is another V stitch. So we're going to jump on over to that chain 1 space in the V stitch and work a double crochet, chain 1, and another double crochet all into that chain 1 space. Then we've got another set of 3, so we're going to work 3 double crochets right into that center double crochet. And as I say, we'll continue doing that all the way across until we get to those last 3 stitches there, because we don't want to work 3 double crochets right into the center one of those. We want a nice border on this edge as well. So there's that. I've got one more chain 1 space, one more V stitch here to work into. You'll of course have a few more repeats on your full size blanket. So I double crochet, chain 1, double crochet right back in that chain 1 space, like so. And then because we're at the end, and I know those are my last 3 stitches, I'm just going to work a double crochet into each of those 3 stitches so that we can still have our nice little border there. So there's the second one, and then I'll finish it all off working into that last marked stitch. So again, kind of like working to the chains or the foundation stitches. If you're having trouble finding just those particular 2 loops, odds are with a yarn this fuzzy, as long as you can get in there with your hook, it's going to look just fine. Nobody's going to say, oh my gosh, you went under the wrong 2 loops. You can't tell. They'd have to get in there with some sort of magnifying glass. So if you can't tell, don't worry about it. So now we're ready for row 4. And now we're ready for row 4. Now row 4 is going to start just as we did with all the others with our chain 3, which is our first double crochet. So I'll go ahead and move my stitch marker right into that top of those chains as best I can there. There we go. And then, of course, just like all the other rows, we're going to start with double crochets in the next 2 stitches. So we maintain that 3 double crochet border at the beginning and end of each row there. There we are. That one wanted to twist on me a little bit. There we go. All right. And then to continue with row 4, it's essentially going to be a repeat of row 2, but because the previous row wasn't a solid row of double crochet, we need to work it just a little differently than row 2. Of course, we're going to go into that chain 1 space again for that first V-stitch. So you always have a V-stitch in your V-stitch. Those get stacked right on top of each other. Nice and fun to make with this yarn, nice and easy. And then, since we worked all 3 stitches into 1 stitch in the previous row, this time we're going to work a stitch in each of these. So just double crochet in each of those next 3 double crochet stitches. So there's 1 and 2 and 3. There we are. So that will be the repeat, of course, then, that takes us all the way across just like it did in row 2. Work a V-stitch in the next V-stitch, and then work a double crochet in each of the next double crochets. And that will get you all the way across row 4. And that's how you work the 4th row and how you work most of the rest of the pattern. We're just going to switch back and forth between rows 3 and 4, 3 and 4, 3 and 4, all the way to the end. The 49th row will be a row 3 repeat. So the 3rd row, which is the one where we've worked all 3 of those double crochets into that center double crochet though. After the 49th row, we're ready for row 50, which is the one that finishes off our entire blanket. So to continue that border we've been building in, we're essentially just going to double crochet all the way across. So we can start again with a chain 3 for the first double crochet. We're not going to bother putting a stitch marker on it because I'm not going to come back to it. And then, of course, just double crochet in those next 2 double crochets. And indeed, just double crochet in each double crochet you come to. But then, of course, when you get to that V-stitch, you're going to need to double crochet in the stitch and in that center chain space, and then in the next stitch. And then, of course, when you come to the double crochets, you just double crochet in the top of those all the way across, and then you can finish off and you'll be done with your blanket. And that's how to crochet the 1-ball easy striped crochet baby blanket. I hope you enjoyed making this pattern. I certainly did. And working with this yarn is so yummy and fuzzy, you can see just how squishy of a baby blanket this makes. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.